At the 2021 Portuguese Grand Prix, Russian driver and public enemy number one, Nikita Mazepin, was voted Driver of the Day. Or was he? Driving his absolute tractor of a Haas, he finished in 19th place, last of the runners and nearly a full lap behind his teammate Mick Schumacher. But wait, I hear you say, I thought Sergio Perez got Driver of the Day at that race because he managed his tyres and brought his car home in 4th place, etc, etc. And you're right, he did win the award, except for some reason the results didn't come in until well after the race had finished. And normally Driver of the Day is announced immediately after the race had finished, normally on the cooldown lap. And why did this happen? Why was there a delay? Because the fans were fed up, the internet is going to internet, and the fans exercised their option to vote. Now, before we unpack this, everything is opinion and it's all based around speculation at the time, but despite everything, it all seems quite believable. And I do remember that there was some kind of weirdness after the Grand Prix, given the speculation on social media about Mazepin and how funny it would be to vote him as Driver of the Day and that sort of thing. Given everything that was happening on social media compared to what actually happened, it all kind of seemed to click together and make sense. And again, whilst it is all a theory, to me it does seem quite believable. So let's dive back to the start of the 2021 season. We're at the tail end of the Ham ver Bot years, and Max Verstappen is starting to look like a real threat to Mercedes now. Hamilton had won 6 of the 7 World Championships available at the time, and it was a hugely dominant period. In fact, Christian Horner recently labelled this as an obscene level of dominance in Formula 1. And he's right, we were seeing outright domination from Mercedes at the front of the field, and unless you were a Mercedes or a Lewis Hamilton fan, it was starting to get a little bit repetitive. And then all the way down the other end of the grid, you had Haas, who signed probably the most disliked, hated driver of all time, the son of a Russian billionaire, an all-round spoiled brat rich kid, Nikita Mazepin. Honestly, people hated this guy before he had even turned a wheel in F1 due to the nature of him having a drive and the attitude he had surrounding him as a rookie in F1. And the worst bit was he got away absolutely scot-free despite the calls for him to be removed from the sport immediately. So all of this stuff around Mazepin was just fuel on the fire. It didn't do Haas any favours bringing him on board, although they had to for financial reasons. In fact, Haas's image is probably still trying to recover from their involvement with Mazepin to some extent. The Mazepin camp, Haas and F1 all released statements on the matter, which all contained very big and clever PR sounding words, but it was all just total rubbish. We were all reminded in F1 that money talks and that there is a lot of corruption. So a portion of F1 fans must have thought, okay, 2 can play at this game, and logged on to Twitter. And looking back on this, it was a great moment because as F1 fans, we are usually very divided on our thoughts and opinions on anything that's happening in the sport. Just go on Twitter for 5 minutes and you'll see endless arguments about a variety of subjects. But with this issue, we were all united in the belief and certainty that Nikita Mazepin was a complete and utter stupid idiot. And the Driver of the Day award is a perfectly good system. Viewers can vote which driver they think has put in the greatest performance. And the reason why it's great is because you can get someone like Max who wins from pole and gets fastest lap and all this and just all round dominates the race. But then viewers will still vote for someone like Lando Norris who, for example, might start from 16th and wind up 4th. So it's not always about the one that wins, it's about the driver that puts in an absolute masterpiece of a drive. And the thing is, the public can vote for any driver that they like. There's no restrictions. And the theory is, for better or worse, F1 has to respect whoever the public vote for, except for probably when it's a little bit inconvenient for them. Surely you must have watched races where the Driver of the Day is announced at the end and you think, really? He won it? That's really weird. So now we return just before the Portugal Grand Prix in 2021, and F1 had some very disgruntled fans on its hands. We were potentially looking at another year of Mercedes domination. We didn't know if the Red Bull was going to last or be any good over a full season yet. And also fans were certain that Haas, and more importantly F1, were all just bought and paid for. And despite F1's pandering around social issues and what's been going on in the world, they refused to make the changes and put the effort in when it counted and when it was called for. So there was only one way that F1 fans could make their voices heard and perhaps put F1 in a bit of an embarrassing position. Use your driver of the day vote. It's the simplest thing there is. And as fans, it's the one thing that we have say over. Now, prior to this race, there were lots of posts around voting for Mazepin as driver of the day for this race. And it was building up and building up. And I remember thinking, what would F1 actually do if this happened? Because never in a million years would he ever win it on merit, because he was a useless driver, and although he carried himself with a big ego, he just did not have the talent to match what he was putting across. And it looked like after the checkered flag had fallen that this little scheme that had originated on social media, this little thing might have been pulled off. And when you consider the enormous wait there was for announcing driver of the day, it just seemed like a bit too much of a coincidence. You can just imagine the people in F1 production who have seen the true results thinking, oh crap, what do we do now? And F1 couldn't just announce Mazepin as driver of the day because it was obvious that it was a joke vote. But also you couldn't block people from voting for Mazepin because then it is obvious what you're trying to do. And so after all that delay, it was eventually announced that Perez had won driver of the day. And although this was well after the race had finished, Twitter had already lit up saying that the results had been messed with. And when you consider all the chat that was going on social media at the time and the weirdness at the end of the race, it just seemed so believable that something strange had actually happened. Now, unless F1 actually came out publicly and said that this was the case, there is no way to prove it. But then in later races in 2021, Mazepin had appeared fairly high up in driver of the day, so I guess people were kind of using that as a sort of a protest vote if they weren't happy with the race overall. Just vote for Mazepin. And F1 had to just leave these results because they couldn't block them. And it wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened when F1 has allowed the fans to have a say and vote for drivers on a particular matter. In 2018, Sergei Sirotkin, who also used many Russian rubles to get into the sport, won the Sky Sports Driver of the Year 2018 poll, as the fans had voted him best driver of the season. An amazing victory considered he was last in the championship with 1 point, had an absolute shocker of a season and was exposed for being a terrible driver, and just beat out Lewis Hamilton, who won 11 races that year and the World Championship. And it was obvious to Sky Sports that something was up, and they declined Sirotkin the award and gave it to Hamilton in the end. So I'd like to think since all this, the sport and the teams have learned the lesson on taking dodgy money from dodgy people to get dodgy drivers into the sport, as it will only negatively impact the image of F1, but you also might find yourself in situations like these two I just mentioned, where the fans are plotting and working against you. Now, we'll never know if Mazepin was actually voted driver of the day, but given how F1 fans can unite and come together and pull things off, I would not be surprised if this did actually happen. But yeah, this is one of those aliens built the pyramids moments in F1, which there are many of, but either way, it's all very entertaining. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Paul, and I'll see you again soon.